G'day folks, it's Nathan here from the FVR 375 channel and welcome to the fourth episode of the Terminal Edge Australia video podcast series. As the more astute of you might have noticed, there's actually two of us here today, and so I have my compadre here, Steve Parker. So Steve's a good mate of mine. We've hunted all over Australia together and we spend quite a lot of time hunting big game recreationally, but we're also working together professionally fairly regularly. So Steve runs a company in the Northern Territory called Vertebrate Pest Services NT, and he does very similar work to what FVR Contracting does in Queensland and Northern Australia. So anyway, thanks for coming today, Steve. Good to have you here, mate.
Thank you.
And yeah, our podcast today is essentially going to cover one of the topics that I've been asked to present early on by a large range of people, which is, you know, the bigger bore cartridges in the context of the Australian hunter. So basically what we're really going to do is go down the rabbit hole of what cartridges are best for big game and potentially dangerous game for the Australian hunter. And then we're going to add a little bit of context around some of the other issues. So we'll talk a little bit about the range of cartridges that are out there. We'll talk about what big and dangerous game is. And then we'll get into some detailed discussion around all those sort of topics. Anyway, we'll get into it. So yeah. I guess the first question to answer, Steve, what do you think big and dangerous game is in Australia?
There's probably a couple categories there.
Mm-hmm.
One being big and one being big and dangerous.
Yep.
Well, I mean, what have we got? We've got buffalo.
Yep.
And scrub bull.
Yep.
I think both of those would fit nicely into that.
Yep.
In the dangerous side.
Yep.
I mean, whilst I'm not saying things like camel can't be dangerous up close, but you wouldn't put them into the dangerous, but you'd put them into the big.
Yeah, I think one of the quantifiers for dangerous is they've got to have a degree of vindictive behaviour. You know, and for me, that probably in the Australian context, our true dangerous game probably sits with scrub bulls and water buffalo. You could make the argument for banting, although most people don't manage to get exposed to those given the
Yep.
you know, isolated locations up in Coburg Peninsula. But you know, they have the same potential as a scrub bull, really.
Yep.
So, yeah. So, and I guess the big game part of this is a little bit different too, because Australia doesn't have a lot of big game. Now, obviously, some of the Victorian and New South Wales folk are going to disagree immediately with me and talk about sambar. But in the big scheme of things, that's not really what we're talking about today. We're not sort of talking about the thin-skinned large game. We're more talking about, you know, the big game in the Australian context. You know, and really it is scrub bulls and buffalo, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of where we want to go with the discussion today. And so where we're going to sort of talk is what are the cartridges that are available and suitable in Australia, and then we'll do a bit of a deep dive into those sorts of areas, and then we'll talk a little bit more broadly about some of the other options out there, and we'll break that down into niches. So I think there's a couple of different niches that I'd qualify for this particular topic. So,
okay.
You know, probably the first niche to talk about is, you know, the medium bore cartridges that are suitable for killing, or what I would call light killing of big and dangerous game. And then we have the cartridges that are big bores, i.e. they're bigger than 40 caliber, for killing dangerous game.
Yep.
And then we go into the category of stopping dangerous game as
Yep.
probably the third niche there. So what we might do is we'll start off with, and we're not going to cover every cartridge known to mankind here today. We're going to talk about the stuff that's a bit more relevant, a little bit less obscure, and is available in Australia. But we will at some point do a bit of a deep dive into, you know, for those Australian hunters who want to hunt internationally, you know, what are your choices there? Where are you going to go and hunt? You know, the big stuff that we all like to dream about, you know, the leopards, the lions, the Cape buffalo, the hippo, you know, that sort of stuff, potentially even an elephant. Anyway, so first two I think we can probably discuss, because I'm only going to talk about two in the first category, which is our medium bore, you know, lighter killing cartridges.
Yep.
And that's the 9.3 by 62 Mauser and cartridges of an equivalent nature in that .366 caliber.
Yep.
And the 375s, of which there's one really that shines clearly. It's the H&H. If anyone's watched anything I've ever
The
presented.
top of the pile, yeah. Yeah.
But there's a number of other options that are ballistically almost the same. So the 9.3 by 62 thoughts.
So one of the arguments that comes up between the proponents of all the calibers are metric versus imperial.
Yeah.
And whilst the arguments on both sides are sometimes you can see the logic behind it, but at the end of the day, something of similar weight, construction, BC, driven at the same velocity, landing at the same spot, is the physical actions received by that animal are going to be very similar, aren't they?
To a point, yeah, I agree. And I think one of the interesting things that occurs in this medium bore category is that a lot of cartridges get compared when the reality is their ballistics are so similar and their calibers are so similar that there's not actually a lot of difference in there. And then when you combine that discussion with bullet technology, that's a whole different ballgame.
Yep.
You put a
That's a new book, that one.
Yeah, you put a monolithic projectile or a homogeneous projectile that doesn't have a lead core, whether it's only swaged in or it's bonded. That monolithic projectile will behave very differently in terms of penetration and terminal characteristics compared to your traditional bullets. So some of those rules around bullet weight, they've gone away.
They have.
Yeah.
Yep. And something that is significantly lighter than an old, let's say, cup and core or a bonded lead-based projectile. Even we're talking nearly 30% lighter, can out-penetrate. And when you start adding the shapes of projectiles like the Woodley Hydro, like the permanent wound channel left by some of those well-designed projectiles, kind of makes them like even superior to a nice opening mushrooming type projectile.
Larger board.
Yes.
Yeah. No, definitely. That's. I think that is a point worthy of consideration in the modern Australian context. For those who want a bit of info on the 9.3 by 62, so there are a number of US podcasts out there, and they're pretty good to listen to. The Big Game Hunting podcast, John McAdams, I listen to him a little bit, and he makes some really good points pretty regularly. He's a massive fan of the 9.3 by 62, and you could equate that to any of the 9.3. So the 9.3 by 66, there's
74R.
Yeah, any of that sort of stuff in that point, 366 caliber. I got to say, I think it has a reputation as well deserved, because basically it was designed by the Germans to counteract the other faster, popular, more expensive cartridges of the time, and really it's direct competition to the 375 H&H. It's a German versus a British, really, if you want to call that. But there are some fundamental differences which we'll go and do in a second. But the 9.3 by 62, it is a fantastic round, I think, for the thinner skinned big game. I personally am not a huge fan of the 9.3 by 62 for bite back game or game that can stomp you. I think it's borderline as a dangerous game cartridge, and that comes down to stopping power. And I'm not saying you can't use it in the perfect circumstances, but I don't feel
your margin for error.
Yeah, it's got low margin for error, and it'll kill big game. I think it's going to be unreliable to stop any big game without a central nervous system shot. And when you look in the bullet weights that we're talking about, most of the other big bores that we're going to talk about today, even the 375 H&H, you're starting at 300 to 350 grain projectiles, so you've got a sectional density that is quite high. You're in the the 0.23s and above, which is pretty widely recommended as being a good thing for penetration, albeit considering the modern nature of projectiles nowadays.
Yep.
But with the 9.3s, you're really looking in those bullet weights from 250, which I think is probably unsuitable unless you're talking like monolithic solids or monolithics in general, or homogeneous projectiles, up to around 286 grains is your standard bullet weight there. So it does a job.
Yep.
But it's not really what that round was designed for. Now, to completely contradict everything I just said, the 9.3 by 62 has been used for years in Africa successfully. And one of the things I think you do have to balance when we're having this sort of discussion about the big bores is shootability. Because there's certain cartridges out there, they're wonderful, but no one can shoot them.
Yep.
And I've got a couple we're going to talk about later that I think they're excellent big game cartridges. They're perfect for dangerous game. In fact, you might say they're near the top. They'll be in the top 5 for sure.
Yep.
But I hate them because you can't shoot them properly.
Yeah, they smack you.
They smack you. You got to have really well designed stocks, and it's not for everyone. So
Yep.
and that's one of the areas where I think something like a 9.3 by 62 or similar in that .366 caliber does shine. So
Yep. But not everyone is physically capable. Let's say people with injuries.
Yeah.
They may not be scared of recoil, but they may be at a point in life where recoil is just no longer achievable.
No, that's right.
Like old shoulder injuries or, like losing condition.
Yep.
But it'll still, with care and consideration, do the job that they want it to do without belting shit out of them.
That's right. So I think the 9.3 by 62 for the well-considered hunter who is willing to pass up a shot is suitable.
Yes. That's right. Not every shot is going to be one that is
that's right.
ethical or humane.
I think one of the challenges of hunting big and dangerous game is though that some circumstances you don't have the option to pass the shot. You've got to take the shot, particularly if you've had a shot and now you've got a wounded, angry or otherwise disturbed animal. And there's this whole issue of adrenaline, which I don't think is talked about enough in big game hunting circumstances. Steve and I have hunted, we've hunted a lot of buffalo together over the years with lots of different calibers, ranging from 375s up to 500s. And there is a real big difference between an Asiatic water buffalo who is undisturbed, doesn't know you're there, and then cops the first round and goes down like a polite little baby, not crying, and then just falls over, versus the Asiatic water buffalo who is spooked, disturbed, onto vehicle noise, all those types of things, and has dropped adrenaline.
Yep.
That animal is much harder
That's
to kill.
Chalk and cheese.
Chalk and cheese. And that's probably one of the key points I think to take across from this discussion is, the smaller stuff in the medium bore range is not as good in that circumstance.
It increases risk too for you. And take away just the humane side of it, it's the physical risk that you face with being unable to stop an animal, especially in close quarters or in complex terrain.
Yep.
They're things that must be thought of and considered.
And that's potentially one of the key themes that is worth considering. When you're talking that potentially dangerous animal in that sort of environment, you're going to get to a point where you actually can't deal with the issue at hand. Like the tool that you have will not solve the problem, and so maybe if you're going to operate with some of those, cartridges that are maybe more marginal in that space and limit the terrain types and type of hunting that you do.
Then that's where the discipline comes in, isn't it?
That's right.
And not and waiting until you are in a position, environmentally wise or terrain wise, where you can see where the animal heads to if your shot is not a instant kill.
Yep.
So that, and I think one of the dangers is that follow up too, especially in thick stuff. If you can't see them, if they go out of sight, and then you're following them up, as you should.
Yep.
And then how many times have you yourself been following something, and then by the time you see it, it's right there.
Because you're focused on your tracking. You're not. You don't have a tracking team where one of you is looking up and forwards and sideways periphery for the animal, and one of you is following ground signs.
Especially lone hunts, 100%.
If you're on your own, you're looking for ground sign.
Yep.
And then you're relying on your senses to pick that animal up. So, good stuff, I think, and definitely relevant when we're talking that medium bore space. Now, I think we're going to have to delve into something that I'm going to find a bit painful, Steve.
Oh dear, what are we going to talk about?
So we're going to have to talk about the 375 H&H, and I think the 375s in general. The 375 H&H isn't the only 375 that's out there. The 375 Ruger has grown massively in popularity over the years, and then there's a bunch of wildcats out there in the 375 space. Not a bunch, but there's plenty of them out there. You got your 375 Taylor, you got your 375 300. I built a 375 444 Marlin on a #1 Mark III Lee Enfield action for no reason that I can define properly.
Good enough reason.
I called it a light express. It's pretty light. she was a little bit punchy, but anyway, the 375s, and I guess we'll do what we just did on the 9.3 with the 375s. So we'll focus on the H&H, noting that in reality land, the ballistics on the rest of them are pretty similar. So 375 Ruger will do just a little bit more than a 375 H&H, but we're not talking much. We're talking
no, but there's other things with the the Ruger though, you look at the pressure that they use to generate the velocity
Yep.
versus the lower pressure in the H&H.
Yep.
Look at the taper of the H&H
Taper of the case.
and the lack of taper in the Ruger.
Mechanical reliability.
Yep, and how much effort's required to extract and
Yep.
up close dangerous game stuff. Do you want to play with that, or do you want to reduce the risk as best you can?
Well, let's talk Australian context. So you've just been out in the Northern Territory savannah hunting for a week with your 375 H&H and whatever rifle is your poison of choice.
Yeah.
And you've been in the dust, you've been in a bit of mud, you shot some pigs with it.
High humidity.
Yeah, you might have shot a scrub bull. Is your chamber clean? Did you have your barrel taped up?
That's a very good question.
So do you have grit in your chamber? If you've got grit and other bits and pieces or anything that isn't ideal, or perhaps you've got a bit too much oil in there or something or other, I'd rather have a tapered, mechanically reliable case for extraction than be worried about 50 feet per second velocity or half an inch of accuracy when we're talking the context that we're talking.
Yeah.
So, for me, and, for anyone who's watched this podcast series, I know we're only on episode 4, but, I did bang on quite severely about how much I love the 375 H&H in the last one, so we probably don't need to do it to death, but, it's... Yeah, for all those reasons. It's mechanically reliable. It's an absolute classic. It's been around since 1912. But here's the reality part, which I don't want to admit to.
Okay.
The 375 H&H, in all of its glory, at all bullet weights, is a very efficient killing round. Mm-hmm. It's not a stopping round. Comments?
No. I agree. There's, the frontal area, it's not just energy, it's not just penetration. That splat factor that increases as your caliber increases. The physical hit before it opens up, that matters.
Yeah.
And whilst you may get the penetration, if it doesn't move all of those components out of the way and tear tissue and blood vessels, it'll kill them. There's no doubt, but it's just the duration in which it takes for that to occur.
Yeah, and so that probably is a good segue into a topic that is hard to discuss because it's hard to clearly define, which is that whole knockout value or knockdown power.
Is that Taylor's?
Well, there's a couple of different ways of looking at it, but ultimately there's very unreliable metrics and even less reliable now with the new projectiles that are out there on the modern market to describe what those things mean anymore. So.
Yep.
The Taylor's knockout value was a great way of doing it. It used to basically give a number that would define how hard that particular cartridge hit that particular game species based on bullet weights, etc.
Yep.
Those old metrics of foot-pounds of energy. So, basically when you're talking a 375 H&H, you're running around that, ballpark, 4,000 foot-pounds? Thereabouts,
from memory-ish,
thereabouts. So 300 grain bullet at about 2,600 feet, 2550 thereabouts, with a 300 grainer. If you're using a good solid one like this sort of thing here, where we've got a Woodley heavy duty 300 grain bullet in a 375, that'll shoot through just about anything.
Through anything we've got.
Yep. But we had a particular example up in the Northern Territory. I won't say where, but. We're privileged to be in a really good location doing some pest control work, and I happen to have a Bruno 602 375 H&H with me, and we had all of the missions in place whilst we were surveying to take out some buffalo and not take them out to dinner, just to take them out. But anyway, so I had the 300 grain heavy duty Woodleys, and we spooked a cracker. He was a good bull.
That was the last bull your last bull of the trip?
Of that trip, yeah.
Yep.
So what was he, like 97, 98? Big body.
Yeah, something like huge body.
He was mid-90s anyway, score-wise, so big head on him, big, tough, mature bull. But it was that difference again of the animal you've spooked versus the animal that doesn't know you're there. And so that animal was thoroughly spooked. I mean, we drove past him and he bolted. Anyway, I've hopped out with my 602. I'm lucky I had cartridges in my pocket because I unleashed. The first couple of rounds were really good, straight through the shoulders, and you could see him stagger, you could see him hurting.
Yep.
But by no means did they knock him over, and that was with the 300 grain Woodleys. Great projectile, nothing wrong with them. In fact, a couple of those exited, which is amazing on a bull that big. 6 rounds to stop that fella. And that's 5 on the run to the point where he couldn't run any further, and then one through the back of the ear to sort out the central nervous system. And I think there's this misconception sometimes with Australian hunters that you can go lighter and it's all going to be okay. And I'm not talking about a 375 specifically here, but you kind of have to cater to your worst case scenario, not cater to your best case scenario. And Australians, I think we get a bit blasé with that sometimes. Because we don't consider what can happen in heavy cover with big animals. And it's I don't know how many times I've heard people say, but you can shoot them with a 308. Well, yeah, you can.
And many have, however. There's been a lot of loss. I found I shot a bull with my 416. Oh, next topic. I shot a bull with my 416 out in that country where I normally go.
Yep.
And I went back 3 months later with a metal detector.
Yep.
I found my 2 projectiles out of my 416.
Yep.
And I found 2 308 projectiles in that pile.
Yeah, right.
And ribs up in the chest, he had a hole through his rib which had healed up, had calcified, but you could still see the hole. But those projectiles were still in that animal, fully recovered. 2 308s.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yep.
It's, and I guess part of what we're talking about here is sporting hunting too. We're talking about the Australian sportsman who is keen to do the right thing by the animal, but wants to enjoy the purity of the hunt. That's what we're really about here.
Yes. And not 300 metres through a massive scope.
No, that's not hunting. Not for dangerous game.
Maybe collecting meat, but not for dangerous game.
Absolutely, and I think there's a fundamental difference there. So if you're out and you do want to take some, tucker for the table or whatever, and you're in buffalo country and you've got a 308 with you, by all means, go and shoot something in the head with your 308, and then harvest the meat off it, and that's an okay thing to do.
Yep.
But it is not the same as walking them up on foot in heavy cover.
Concur.
Where you need to be using something appropriate to the task.
Yep.
Anyway, we are digressing slightly. We'll just come back onto the 375. So
Yes.
the 375s, again, and we discussed this a bit the other day, but you're sort of in that 250, in reality, down to 200 grains for the 375 375 caliber projectiles. But, the 200s, that's very light. That's a pig round. The old 225.
You're losing a lot of BC.
Yeah.
At 200 grains.
Absolutely, yeah, they're short and fat.
Yeah. That'd be a pig bomb.
Great on pigs, but you don't want to be shooting anything big with that.
No.
Then the 235s, the 270s, even the 270 grain projectiles, with one exception, are not suitable really for the Australian context of big game in a 375. So they're just not really. They're designed for thin-skinned bigger game. They're not designed for your heavy-skinned, heavy muscled,
deep penetration,
big-boned animals. Which is what we're talking about today. With the exception, I believe, probably being the monolithics. That monolithic projectile choice has really changed the game a little bit. And potentially some of the petition bullets as well. So we're not just talking about the Nosler petition, but, potentially, what are they, the spear round, the Grand Slam, whatever it is. There's another one that's got a petition, the H bullet. Anyway, another great round, but essentially
Swifts they're different.
Yeah, the lead cores anyway sectioned off, so you've got a fully jacketed with no gaps in it bullet that'll go through, and they kind of do what the homogeneous projectiles do in terms of penetration at a given bullet weight. And certainly where you're talking those homogeneous, we're talking the Barnes X, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
The Hornady offerings similar as well, and the GMXs, that type of thing. Launch fast. I think they changed the game a little bit in terms of bullet weights.
Yes.
But if you're going to go with a 375 H&H on big game, you're better off in that 300 and 350 grain category, in my opinion. And, if you're an Australian hunting Australian big game, one of my other thoughts is that you potentially should be supporting one of our bullet manufacturers, i.e. Woodley.
Yes.
They just produce wonderful projectiles.
They do.
I've got some examples here in front of us. Where are we? So there's a 300 grainer out of something. I couldn't even tell you what that came out of, but it's at the 375 that it did some wonderful work, and with a couple of exceptions there, and we'll talk about these a little bit later. They're all Woodley projectiles with the exception of a couple of 416 petitions there. So great projectiles, and eminently suitable where you're out with your 375 H&H on the big game task.
Yep.
But it does pay me the 375 is a wonderful, wonderful round, and I think there's some different context to add when we start talking about international hunting in a little bit. for the Australian hunter.
Yep.
You know, for the person who wants to go overseas and have a crack at the big stuff. You know, predominantly probably in Africa is really
Like
what
plains game sort of thing.
no, bigger. You know, where we're going to go the dangerous guys. You know, 375 does fit into that task, but you're backed up under African law in every country.
There are minimums, aren't there, for various?
Well, there is. So there's minimums, and typically that is going to be the 375 H&H. Some countries it's 9.3 by 62. But you're backed up by a professional hunter. And your professional hunter, I can guarantee you, he or she...
He's packing something with some serious energy.
Some wallop. He's not going to be carrying anything under about a 458, I would say, is normally minimum. But we'll get onto that topic in a little bit.
Yep.
So, anyway, do you think we've done the 375 to death there, Steve?
Yeah, I think so. It's for Australian hunting though. It is an excellent consideration, especially if you only have the one gun and you're only doing the one trip.
Is the 375 better than a 9.3?
Oh, I'm Imperial all the way. In our context, I think so. I think it is.
Yeah,
because the projectile choice and weight is better. The case design, in my view, with that taper is better. And I am a fan of the belted magnums. You know, my first rifle's a 300 Win Mag. And for some reason, you know, that's obviously just one of those little biases that you end up with. I enjoy the belted magnums. And I think the 375, you know, that's just, well, it's the mother too, isn't it?
Oh, that's right. It's the granddaddy of all the belted magnums, really, in terms of cartridges on. So absolutely, that's a valid thing. And I think, you know, for me personally, you know, I don't want to go and rubbish the newer cartridges out there because they'll do the job absolutely. And if you got a 375 Ruger, there's nothing wrong with that. Everything we've said that the 375 H&H can do, your 375 Ruger can do it as well.
Yes.
Is it as cool?
They come back pretty hard, pretty fast, those Rugers.
Yeah, well, for me, it's the cool factor a little bit. And that's a personal thing. Like, we're not saying that you have to have a bit of cool factor kills buffalo. It doesn't. But you know, a bit of history.
It's history, 100%. It doesn't always have to be the latest and greatest. And some of those old cartridges, especially when we get now the back end of this conversation, some of those olds and bolds, they are old, and they are still relevant today.
Well, some of those formulas haven't changed on the big game field.
And no, physics hasn't changed, has it?
Physics cannot change. It must be what it must be. Right. So, I think where we're going to go next is up into what I would categorise as the true big bores. And, you know, again, you know, some people call various things, but I call anything above 40 caliber in a rifle cartridge to be a big bore.
Yes. And
we're going to talk about some of the good stuff, some of the bad stuff, some of the old stuff, and sort of go from there. So I guess probably the easiest and most common place to start in the 40 cal pluses is the 416s. That's, you know,
I'm a fan. 416.
Yep.
I'm running a 416 Chatfield Taylor. Yep. In a M98 with 24-inch barrel. It's one of my favourite walking guns. Yep.
Absolutely.
Great pano. I wouldn't, if we're talking about the stop versus kill, I don't think it has the stop. Yep. Most definitely an excellent killer, especially with those Woodley weld cores, you know, like those round nose soft points.
Yep.
In that 400 grain sort of mark.
Yep.
Great pano. Like on a broadside, they are balled up on the skin on the other side with a big stretch. You know, they receive all that energy. You know, they're a great killing projectile.
Absolutely.
Or caliber cartridge.
Yep. And so, in the 416 space, for those who aren't sort of tracking, the Taylor has been around for a long. Well, the Chatfield Taylor has been around for a long while. It's basically, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you know, it's more or less 458 Win Mag neck down to 416 is.
I make mine out of the 458 cases.
Yeah. So you know, similar case capacity to a 458 Win Mag, but then not running a .458, running a .416, and so you do get a little bit shorter cases. Probably the shortest of the 416s that are common.
Yes.
Although I'd argue it's probably not super common anymore.
Well, no, it's not. But there was a period where It was because it fitted within the M98 action without doing a great deal of work to make it fit. It was a bolt face increase,
Yep.
and a little bit of taking off on the bolt stop, and then small amount of magazine work, and then you had a big bore.
Or to a point, grab a 338 Win Mag or a 458 Win Mag.
There you go.
Take the barrel off,
Yep.
ream a new one and put it on, and there you go, 416 Taylor.
Yep.
So, for that type of thing, a good cartridge. I know quite a few people up in the Northern Territory still really like that round. I know quite a lot of fellas that run it.
There was a well-known gunsmith up there who enjoyed making them, and he made many.
Yep.
And it was, I won't say his specialty, but that was a lot of people that I've spoken to with the Taylor. It was built by him.
Yep.
It's just a great little gun.
I think too, and this will be true to the 458 Win Mag when we talk about it in a little while. It's that it's not a short case, but it's shorter than most of the other offerings that are out there.
Well, it's an eighth of an inch shorter than a Win Mag, 300 Win Mag.
Yep.
Which is shorter again than a 375.
Yep. And when you consider the nature of the projectiles and the fact that they're crimped in a cannula, generally, all that sort of stuff, it does make it a bit shorter, a bit handier. So advantages of that, your bolt throw's a little bit shorter. The taper on it's present, not amazing, but present.
Yes.
It's got enough of a shoulder on it, so you can, all those sorts of things. And you can run the same bullet weights at more or less the same velocities that you can a lot of the other 416s. And so just jumping into that, so the 416s are really synonymous with a 400 grain projectile of any sort, whatever your poison may be in terms of that particular preference, but running at around about that 2400. In reality, 23 to 2400 feet per second is normally where you get. And I would say the Taylor's probably at the bottom end of that spectrum, maybe the 22, 250, depending how hard you want to push that pressure-wise with modern powders.
Yeah.
But it's at the lower end of the spectrum. But as we'll discuss in a minute with a couple of the other cartridges, and there are some magic velocities out there that just work, and it doesn't mean faster. And particularly where you're talking about bullet weight and frontal area, and you get into the discussion about terminal ballistics. There's a lot to talk about there in terms of things that just work and have always worked. And I've got a very specific case that we'll talk about in a minute. But so the 416 Taylor, that's an option. Probably one of the most common 416s out there in the current parlance is this one here, which is the 416 Remington Magnum. So it's not exactly this, but it's basically a 375 H&H case necked up to .416. So fair bit to like about that, really.
Lots to like.
Yeah. So and then you go to the more cavernous 416 Rigby, which is one of our other common classics, and I'm certainly going to bang on about that for a little while shortly. And that doesn't round out the 416s. You've got the 416 Ruger as well. I don't have an example of that here today, but they're probably the four common ones, I'd say, in the specific .416 caliber. Yep. Now, pros and cons. There's some personal preference issues here. So we talked about the Taylor and where that sits. The 416 Rem Mag, I've tried to love it. I just can't.
What didn't you like though?
I feel I might have had a bad It did everything I asked it to do.
Yeah.
I've shot a number of scrub bulls and pigs with it over the years. I had a Winchester Model 70 Safari Express in it, and I think, to be fair, the length of pull on that rifle was a little bit short for me. It's trying to do what a 416 Rigby does, but with more pressure.
Yes.
Now, it is eminently suitable as a round. It doesn't have pressure issues. That's not what I'm saying at all. This is a personal preference problem for me, I think. Maybe it's just not classic enough.
Maybe, but then, and we won't go to this particular topic because that'll be a topic for another discussion, and that is twist rate.
Sure.
And how that affects. I mean, if you're delivering the same projectile at the same velocity, the same location, then and you've got two varying twist rates,
absolutely,
then there's going to be a difference.
It is a key element of terminal ballistics. Yeah, no, definitely.
I think the big thing between things like the Remington Magnum and the Rigby is similar velocities but pressure.
Yep.
And so that Rigby case is cavernous.
Yes.
It's a very big case, and it delivers, let's say similar ballistics, but it's a lot less pressure.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that gets misconstrued a little bit with some of these discussions. So people will say the 416 rem mag and a 416 Rigby, which, in reality land, they're the two most popular 416s that are out there on the market for good reason. They're both excellent rounds. The 416 rem mag is probably a little bit more economical. It's less of a challenge to fit the right amount of rounds in a magazine. So typically,
not as fat.
Yeah, a lot of the Rigbys you're going to only get 3 in there unless you're running a Rigby or something like that can fit 5.
Yeah.
Which or you've got a specially adapted belly plate on your bottom metal on that particular rifle, etc., etc. But the reality is, with a 416 rem mag, if you're going to be hitting that 2,400 feet per second, or you want to, put a 450 grain bullet in it, which you can do in a 416, bump that bullet weight up a little bit, increase the sectional density if you want to go down that pathway. And if you're hunting buffalo, that's not a bad thing.
Yep.
But you're at the top end of what it can do pressure-wise.
Yes.
And yes, our powders are now temperature stabilised, particularly a lot of our great ADI stuff. And, again, if you're an Australian shooter, be using ADI powders.
Yep.
Don't be using the other stuff. The ADI powders are great.
Just use it or lose it. If we don't use it,
they're made here. They're simply excellent, and what we should be doing.
But they're exporting it, aren't they? I mean,
absolutely.
It's just a lot of it is renumbered and then moves to the American market as well.
As it well should do. It's great to see an Australian company doing well.
Shit, yeah.
But really, what you get at, like, where are they again? I'll just do a little bit of comparison here, shall I, Steve?
Oh, 100%.
So if you look at that, I don't know how well you can see that really, but that the Rigby case, the lengths are similar, but the Rigby case is significantly fatter than the Rem Mag, and so again, it's simple physics. This stuff, like it'll do the 2,400, but it's doing it easy. If you wanted to run them at 2,600 in a Rigby case, you could. I just don't know why you'd want to do that, because you'd punch yourself into next week.
Yeah, there's going to be that equal and opposite.
Yeah, that's physics. So, and that's probably an interesting point of note when you're talking these big bore cartridges for, the Australian context. An incremental increase in velocity when you're talking 400 grain and heavier projectiles equals an exponential increase in recoil potentially and shootability. So that's why, and a lot of these bigger bore projectiles, they're designed to operate within impact velocity ranges. So you go pushing them up at silly velocities, or above what's recommended, you're going to get silly results. That's just how the
they stop doing what they're supposed to do.
Well, they're out of their design parameters. It's
lose peno.
Yep.
Start shedding weight.
Yep. Parachute when they hit. And,
yeah.
You don't want any of that sort of behaviour out of a projectile. You want good, predictable, bone crushing, penetrating, with good expansion,
predictable
type of behaviour, and
is important.
Absolutely, and that's
because that's confidence, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how much of engaging an animal up close has to do with the confidence in your gear and your terminal performance of your projectile.
If you're a bit wavy on what that projectile is going to do when you put it through a shoulder bone, you're not going to shoot the shoulder bone.
Mm-mm.
So that's
confidence. Good confidence takes all those other things out of the way and allows you to concentrate on one thing, and that is putting it on the money.
Yep.
That's in my view, anyway.
Oh, 100%. And look, I think if you shoot enough, everyone's seen anomalies with projectile performance. So I've seen Woodleys fail. Not often, and only in certain scenarios, but they have failed. But I could say that for nearly every projectile I've shot over my however many years.
And we're talking about the world cause those, not the hydros.
Correct. Yeah. But when I say fail, I mean,
define fail.
Did I recover?
Did you pull it out of the animal?
Yeah. Did it fail? I don't know. Or did I have expectations that are quite high because I'm a bit fussy?
When you look at like the size of the bone, like the actual knuckle, the shoulder knuckle on one of those big bulls.
Very impressive.
I mean, so, and I've had the 500 nitro projectiles come out quite small. But, man, the bone that they've been through, you can't smash that with a sledgehammer.
No, and it's now got a hole like that through it.
Yep.
It's, it's pretty significant. So I think that we're on the 416s here. But
sorry, yes.
Just one quick topic to talk about there in terms of projectiles with the Australian context. So I know projectiles have changed, and that, the modern technology with the bonding, the homogeneous projectiles, all that type of stuff really has changed the game in terms of what the projectiles do. And it's brought life back to a lot of these cartridges, and it's made the smaller cartridges, in fairness, despite what we've said about the mid-bores earlier, it's made them more capable than they've ever been.
Yes.
But there used to be this concept that, on dangerous game, there's a bit of Africa to this, but for something like a buffalo, the same. Particularly if you're carrying a double rifle or something. We're going to go there in a minute, don't you worry. But if you're carrying something like that, to carry a soft and a solid.
Yep.
So you whack your soft in to maximum damage, broadside shot, all that type of stuff, and then you got your solid next in the mag, so that if it doesn't drop on the shot, you can whack it straight through Texas heart shot, break hips, etc., and break the animal down so that it either can't eat you or step on you, or if it's heading away into heavy cover, you've got some opportunity to get to the vitals with a rear end raking shot. Thoughts? I've got some specific thoughts here.
So, I remember when I first started playing with double rifles, that was an understanding that I was given from some people, and I think that in certain circumstances it has merit. Yep. I, however, have never fired a solid out of my 500.
Yep.
I've always run the 570 grain Woodleys.
Yep.
And they're both soft points.
Yep.
And I've found that, especially with something like a Texas heart shot, there's not a great deal of disruption to that projectile, and it's going to penetrate very well.
Yep.
So, bearing in mind that we're only talking about buffalo here, right? And then
buffalo and scrubbers,
Yep. And also taking shots that are calculated.
Yep.
And not just throwing it through the black bit.
Yep.
And would that matter if you were just throwing it through the black bit? I think it probably would.
Yeah, if you were to go through the paunch, maybe. But that's as you say, that's not what we're aiming for on that shot.
That's right.
Yep. Interesting. So I've and sorry about the kookaburras there. There's not much I can do about those guys. But I decided to join in, so good on them. But so it's an interesting topic. The classic part of anyone wants to do that, bit of soft and solid. It just sounds good. And maybe put them between your fingers, ready to go.
100%.
Fantastic. But I think and I've done it both ways. So I've, one of my previous big bore rifles was a 470 Nitro, and I have run softs and solids on buffalo, and it achieved all of the aims that you thought would be a good idea. You whack a soft in on the shoulder. Generally speaking, it's tipped over about there, and then you whack a solid straight in. But I would argue now with the modern nature of projectiles, and even in the last 20 years, it's come a long, long way from where we were, and we started out in the early 2000s or whatever on a lot of this big game hunting.
Yep.
Projectiles have just changed so much.
Yes.
I think now we're at a stage of life, particularly with the Australian context of, big and dangerous game. You don't need them. And you hear a lot of comments about the guys in Africa. They don't want them because, if you get in a herd scenario, the solid's going to zip it.
Yeah, and if you're paying for every drop of blood that they find.
Yep.
Yep.
You're potentially going to shoot more animals than you need to shoot, or not be able to take a shot in a herd scenario. And I think the only example, potentially where it's probably two examples in an African context that are relevant, and that's if you're going to take elephant, you probably want a solid.
Yes.
But you're going to brain shoot, which is a bit different to what we're talking about in the Australian context on buffalo and scrubbers.
Yeah.
Or over there, if you got your big bore rifle and you just happen to see the nicest clip springer or whatever you've ever seen walk past, maybe a solid's appropriate out of your 416 instead of a soft.
Especially if you wanted to mount it. So
you don't have a hole the size of its head out the offside shoulder, which is a bit of a misnomer. Like these big projectiles, they don't do that. They don't come apart and cause massive damage of that nature. They're designed for big permanent wound channels through heavy stuff, so it's different. Yep. But we have digressed significantly from the 416 topic. But
shall we return or?
That was bound to happen, wasn't it? So, so we're going to talk rifles later on, but this one is a 416 that we've borrowed just for the podcast. So. Steve and I have got a number of different rifles that in these sort of calibers that we enjoy shooting and hunting with. I thought this is just a good example of perhaps what is the quintessential concept for a dangerous game rifle for the Australian hunter. So CZ 550 in 416 Rigby, 2 cross bolts through it, bit of work on the tang, bit of work on the trigger to make it a little bit nicer. It's got room to put an optic on it if you wanted to do that, although again, strictly speaking, these bigger cartridges probably not required, and then a really nice set of express sights.
Yep.
And we're only commenting before, just having a look through a good set of express sights. You're good out to 100, aren't you?
100%. Yep.
Easy 100.
Pig size and upwards, I'd be happy at 100 metres with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're going to put that in a useful place. anyway, yeah, the 416s, you know, great cartridges. It's a very good caliber, and it gives, in my opinion, a fairly solid step up from the capability of a 375 on genuinely big stuff.
That's a big step up.
It's a big step up.
Because that frontal, it's almost like an exponential thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but sectional densities in terms of its, so that ability to penetrate a target described as a decimal, but again, it's very similar to external ballistics in terms of the ballistic coefficient, but it's more a description of how long it is to wide, which will then talk about its ability to penetrate a target. The sectional densities on the 416s at a 400 grain bullet weight are pretty good. They're certainly in a very good place. So your 416 Ruger, your 416 Rigby, your 416 Taylor, and your 416 Rem Mag. In the Australian context, if you're going to get a 416, that's probably where you're going, isn't it? I think.
Yep. Well, you also, if you don't want to go custom, you're limited to what's within the market.
Well, that's right, and I guess that's another key concept for what we're talking about today. Is there's a lot of different options we can go down here that we could talk about.
Yep. Ammo availability too.
But it's ammo availability, it's rifle availability, it's what's common, and we'll get to some of that a little bit later on. One of the things we haven't discussed, which I don't know if I want to go down that rabbit hole because it doesn't really fit with how I think about ballistics, but Weatherby cartridges. So Roy Weatherby was a proponent of bigger, well not bigger, faster is better. But he applied that to his bigger cartridges as well. And so, we're not going to talk too much about the Weatherby line today. They suit a...
They have their place, but...
Do they?
Not what we're talking about, but they have a place. I mean, when you look at what they were used for in the Americas...
Oh, 100%, yeah.
I mean, they were...
Yeah.
Well, you look at where the Wildcats have gone now. Weatherby, with that big... or that very sharp rolled shoulder, the taper,
I think personally, and this is a great point of contention, I think the Weatherby cartridges aren't very useful in a big game context. Unless you're talking homogeneous projectiles, and again, this is opinion according to Nathan, so, there's going to be people out there who fundamentally are opposed to what I'm saying right now. But I believe that there are, you operate projectiles capacity within their impact velocities. You don't operate them at ridiculous velocities and then hope for the best, which is what Weatherby has done. And that has changed a little bit again. I keep banging on about homogeneous projectiles, etc. And, that has changed the game a little bit, I think. But you find me a shooter of a 416 Weatherby or a 460 Weatherby who isn't scared of their rifle. And, they're hard to shoot.
My first experience with a 460 Weatherby was an eye-opener.
Yep. Would you call it confronting?
It was at the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is
come back.
Steve likes to shoot 500 nitros and 577 nitros. So he's got a real penchant for the big stuff. And he was still, I'm going to use the word, scared of the 460 Weatherby.
I may or may not have taken a step back.
And look, I've never shot an animal with a 460 Weatherby. I have fired a 460 Weatherby previously, and I had to say I really didn't enjoy the experience a whole bunch.
Yeah. There's other guns that'll do, other calibers and cartridges that will do the same job, and they are less confronting. Yeah.
And again, it gets back to that. I have this personal theory that every caliber size, more so than the cartridge, has its ideal velocity ranges for terminal performance on animals, and we get very caught up in the Australian market gets caught up on external ballistics because we follow the US market, and the US market's all about that, how flat, how fast, how much drop and drift, all that type of stuff. Can I whack a ballistic turret on it? And that is absolutely not what we're talking about today. Like it doesn't matter in these bigger cartridges. What matters is sufficient energy and sufficient terminal ballistics in terms of sectional density and bullet construction to get inside the vitals and break down a big animal by breaking its offside shoulder. That's what we're about today.
Yes.
So, that stuff has a place. Place is just not here. So, that's sort of where we're at there.
And our ranges are usually never that far that you need to have that sort of.
No, not when you're hunting big game. It's just not so much of a relevant factor. And I think one of the other tenets that we'll sort of just mention now, as we've still got a fair bit to talk about. You know, we're in nearly an hour now. We've got a bit more to go yet, so that is what it is. But you know, and I've heard a few people say this in other you know, podcasts and YouTube videos, etc. And it's 100% valid. You know, there's cartridges and there's calibers, and ultimately that largely is irrelevant. What is relevant is the impact velocity and the projectile construction. So you can take the coolest cartridge in the world and put a crappy projectile in it and try and zip it through a really big animal, and it's going to fail. Yeah. So it's not about the cartridge to a point. It's about what you do with a projectile at a given velocity. And if it doesn't fit in terms of impact velocities, in terms of terminal ballistics, you're playing the wrong game.
Yeah,
that's the reality of where I think we.
Yeah, I can't argue with that.
We are with that. So, yeah. All right. So I think we've done the 416s pretty hard there.
I think so.
So let's do a couple of little outliers in that space. So, you know, we haven't really broken down rifle types. We're going to do that in a minute, though.
Yeah.
We'll get to the end of the cartridges first, then we'll sort of go there. So, a couple of the outliers in that sort of, they're not 416s, but they're in that sub 458 great killers, not necessarily stoppers category, although we'll have a discussion on that also later, I feel. And two that I wanted to talk about because I reckon they're wonderful is the... I'm just going to find them here before I go yapping on about it because I've got light in my eyes and I can't see properly.
I think that's them too.
That's those two there.
It's the J and the...
Yeah, so these two here. So again, I'll just hold them up so you can see them. And they're very, very similar in terms of what they do, although their actual caliber is different. So we've got the 400 Jeffrey, or the 3-inch, or the 450-400 Nitro Express, as they call it, which is primarily a double rifle cartridge, but is used in single shots as well in the Ruger No. 1H, or Ruger No. 1s. Fantastic cartridge. So 40 caliber in the double rifle space. We'll talk about that. And then a cartridge that I don't reckon should be as obscure as it is today, and some would argue that it's not. But in reality, it has become a little bit obscure, which is the 404 Jeffrey.
Yep.
So
it has a following, but it's not broad. It's
not where it used to be. I'm going to put the 416 next to it because there's a discussion point we have to have there.
Yep.
So there's a few double rifle cartridges in the last few years that have enjoyed a resurgence, and I think we are not going to do a ridiculous dive into all of the Nitro Express cartridges. We'd never get this done today, and we're going to go way over what I thought we were going to with time anyway. But you know, when you're talking about Nitro Express cartridges, there's probably three in Australia.
Yep.
I think.
Yep.
You know, you've got the 450-400 3-inch, which we're talking about just there. We've got the 470 Nitro Express.
Yep.
And I don't have one here today, but the 500 Nitro Express.
100%.
I think they're your three for Australia.
Yep.
You know, and you know, potentially there's another whole episode there to talk about double rifles and cartridges and do a bit more of a deep dive into some of the other cool stuff that's a little bit more obscure, and the black powder expresses and all that type of good, and the European ones, and you know, all that type of stuff. But we're not going to go there today. So, in my opinion, in the 40 cals, the 450-400 3-inch. I can't exactly articulate why, but it does magical things. So I have seen this particular cartridge out of many different rifles in many different scenarios on many different game species just be thoroughly enduring every time it's used.
Yep.
I've got a 450-400 3-inch on a Heim, and it's I've shot quite a bit of game with that now. Although I haven't actually taken a buffalo with that rifle. So
haven't we?
No, not that rifle. So it's done quite a bit of scrub bull and pigs and that sort of thing.
We should probably fix that.
It's probably something we've got to sort out. But the 450-400 Nitro Express, I mean, the first thing about it is that it's got Nitro Express in the title. So
that's magical powers right there.
Yeah, sounds cool. Which
Very
is
cool.
You know, is clearly a thing. But it's been around for a long time in various forms. So it was a 3-inch case, it was a 3¼ inch case. You know, for anyone watching this channel, you've probably read Jim Corbett's books. You know, the 450-400 3-inch was one of the double rifles that he carried in India regularly. Shot a number of man-eating tigers with it, and you know, it's hard to fault it as a concept. But basically, from a ballistic point of view, so people will say it does 2,150 feet per second, generally speaking. My experience has been slightly different. So, my rifle regulates a little bit slower than that with the Woodley projectiles.
Yes.
And so you've got Hornady DGX as well, but in that sort of 2,050 to 2,100 feet per second. But it is just poisonously effective on big game. So, I would probably, even though it's got Nitro Express in the title, I still think it fits in this category where it's not a stopper, it's a killer.
Yep.
And its ballistics are below a 416 Rigby.
Yes.
But I cannot tell you why. It just works really, really well. And there's probably an argument there, with some of the 416s, you don't have to drive them at 2,400 feet per second.
No.
The magic happens at around 2,100. And so as long as your impact velocity is above 2,000 with a 40 caliber projectile, there is sufficient energy transfer and impact for that to do the job.
It's like where the graphs cross.
It's where the graphs cross.
With the penetration and the energy delivered.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And look, I just want to. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this too well on camera, but so they are both expended projectiles out of the 450, 400, and they are. Oops. Throw that one away. That one's the same. So they are absolutely massive. And here's one out of a 470 nitro. So the mushroom's actually about the same. And one of my theories is that at that particular 40 caliber projectile weight, they penetrate, and as long as you've got the right design on a projectile, which clearly the Woodleys do, they penetrate effectively, and then they open, and so you get through all the stuff that's unimportant, and then there's significant damage in the stuff that is important inside the boiler room on the animal, depending on your shot placement, obviously. And so I just think there is a magic formula that isn't there necessarily with some of the other calibers when you're talking the 416/400 type of calibers. So, anyway, the 450-400 3-inch, it's a wonderful cartridge. It's probably the easiest of the Nitro Expresses to shoot. Don't get me wrong, it's still got some boot, but it's
not as much in your face as like the 470s or the 500.
No, it's not confronting like some of the bigger rounds. But I think the sectional density or the ability to penetrate is what gives it its power or its terminal ballistics. It gets in before it opens, and then when it opens at about the same rate or the same width as a 470. So that's been my experience with it thus far over the years. So great cartridge. Now, the other one that's, Steve, I think it'd be immensely remiss of us not to talk about.
Very much.
Is the 404 Jeffrey. The 404 Jeffrey is brilliant.
Yep.
Like, it is just, in terms of what it does, it basically does what a 416 Rigby does.
Yep.
But the difference is, so the bullet weight's the same, the projectile is actually slightly different. So a 416 Rigby is actually 0.416. The 404 Jeffrey, for reasons that I absolutely cannot explain, is 0.423. So make it make sense, team.
No, I don't know.
I don't know. So the 404 Jeff, again, like the Rigby, a little bit ahead of its time. No belt on it. It is a good-looking case. It is the basis for a lot of the modern Magnums that are out there that are caseless designs as well. I think it fits in terms of its classic nature with the 416 Rigby, definitely.
Yep.
There's a pretty cool story around that as well. So was it Robert Ruark was really the reason why the 416 Rigby took off and the 404 Jeffrey didn't. So the reality of it was, I don't know what the year was, but 404 Jeffrey was a workhorse in Africa, for cropping, for culling, for elephants, for buffalo, for everything. So a lot of the game scouts and everyone, they used to run 404s. And, there was some logistics reasons behind why that was the case. Anyway, it was really, really popular in Africa. It still has a pretty strong following over there, because, again, it does what the other 416s do, and certainly has that classic nature to it. But essentially, Harry Selby had a double rifle. I don't know what caliber that was, but before he went on safari with Robert Ruark, he ran it over and broke it. Or whether it was him that ran it over or someone else ran it over, someone will correct me in the comments, I'm sure. But anyway, the rifle was ruined and they couldn't get another one.
Yeah.
So what they could get was a 416 Rigby, and that's where the 416 Rigby's notoriety and fame came from.
But it wasn't his first.
Wasn't his first choice. No. Now, is that a happy coincidence? Yeah.
It's for Rigby.
It is for Rigby. And look, in my mind, they're as classic as each other. The 404 Jeff and the 416 Rigby. I just, You know, I think the 404 Jeffrey probably does what the 450-400 3-inch does in terms of ballistics. Like it's a little bit lighter, not because it has to be, it's just how it is in terms of how it's designed. A very slight degree of difference in sectional density and penetration, but if you can find me an animal in Australia or Africa that can tell the difference, I mean, yeah, that's
Yeah, good point.
yeah. I don't know how you go with that.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And doesn't it? It also comes down to the manner in which you shoot it.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? And if you're comfortable shooting, if it's got a little bit less recoil or a little bit less muzzle blast, and also, it's not just recoil that stops people from or makes people flinch, is it?
Yeah.
I mean,
No.
it's the muzzle blast, and if you can reduce that muzzle blast, and if that's burning less powder with a longer barrel, for similar ballistics,
Yep.
if that's what it takes to, take away that, that
Trepidation.
trepidation,
Yep.
then that's a good thing. And if your ballistics are similar,
Yep. Absolutely. No, hard to disagree with any of those sentiments. So, righto. So that's the below 458s, I reckon we have covered there. Now, again, as we said at the start,
not exhaustive.
We're not going to cover everything on the list today. We're just going to cover stuff that we feel is probably, not necessarily common, but more common in the Australian context. And so with that in mind, we're going to step up into the bigger bores designed for essentially stopping, so above the 458s. And I think, is that a metric you'd agree with? So that 500 grain projectile at 2100-ish feet per second, anything that qualifies there and up is in the stopping category, and we can talk about everything from here on. So
What about the 4570 though?
Well, I think we have to talk about the 4570 because there's a lot of people out there who have one. So I did bring one down today for that reason. So I mean, most people know what a 4570 is. That's one there. So
it's one of those cartridges that, because it fits in a lever gun, it gets discounted.
Yep.
But I would venture to say that with modern projectiles and the choice of modern powders maintaining, pressures as they should be, it's kind of not as cowboy gun as what it used to be.
Yep.
And whilst I've only had limited experience with the 4570, and I've shot a couple of pigs and that big scrub bull out near Bachelor in Darwin.
Yep.
And I shot that bull at 90 metres out of a little 4570 double gun.
Yep.
It made, the shot landed where it really should have, and it made 5 metres. It received a second shot as it went down.
Yep.
And both of those projectiles, Woodley 405 grainers, were bundled up on the skin on the other side. So, is it a 458 Win Mag? No.
With one exception, but
considering that you're only looking at, 1800-ish, 1850 feet a second out of those in the 4570?
Out of most actions, I agree. About that ballpark, I think. Yep.
So you haven't reached that nice little 2000, 2100 threshold.
No, and that's a key point with that cartridge is that these gains are not, these small velocity changes at the similar bullet weights make a big difference. They're not incremental.
Yep.
With these calibers, in a 45 cal. You only got a 400 grain bullet, so it's 100 grains lighter.
Yes.
So it's got less sectional density, it penetrates less, and you can get it out a couple of hundred feet per second slower.
Yep.
When you do the physics on that, like that, it's not the same.
No.
It's close.
No, it is not the same, 100%.
Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of people out there who love the 4570, and look, I've had 3 of them. I've had 2 guide guns on the Marlins, and I've had a Ruger No. 1 4570, and that's the exception. So in a Ruger No. 1, which is a very strong action falling block Farquharson style, obviously, you can load a 4570 to do what a 458 Win Mag does nearly.
Yeah.
And because you're not in a tube mag, you can put traditional.
You got a choice of projectiles.
Yeah. So definitely. Look, I don't disagree. Look, I think for the Australian context,
for the dangerous game side of the house, do you think that would you use a 4570?
Yes, but
caveated.
I would put a caveat on that, which is I'm only going to run either homogeneous projectiles or Woodleys in those heavier weights. I'm going to, in my brain, as I'm hunting the animal, I'm going to think of that as a killing cartridge, not as a stopping cartridge.
Yes.
So I'm not going to put myself in a dumb position where I can't stop something with a good, frontal shot if something's coming at me or whatever. But yeah, look, at the end of the day, like a 45-70 will get the job done. And is it a good scrub ball round? Yeah, I think so, generally speaking. And like the scrub ball versus buffalo thing's interesting. Like I think from an animal perspective, the buffalo's harder to kill.
Yes.
Definitely. Like there's more to them. They're big.
They are
they're nasty.
A big animal.
They've got a lot of gristle.
There's a lot of blood in them too.
Yeah, a lot to get through. They've got massive adrenal glands. So, if you spook one, it's going to drop all sorts of adrenaline, and they just get harder to kill. I don't think a big scrubber, they have that, but not to the same extent as a buff.
Yep.
But I think there is such a wild variance in scrub bulls in Australia. And look, they've been classified as a game animal in Australia for years. So we're not talking about shooting a cow in a paddock. We're talking about scrub bulls, as a quantifiable, dangerous game animal in the wilds, generationally wild, never seen humans before potentially. That is a different beast to your local drought master. Like that, they are.
Yes.
And some of those animals have bigger fighting pads on them. They've got real thick hides. They can be hard to put down. But, I think...
Apples for apples, the buffalo is harder.
I can't argue with it. It's probably more predictable than they'll generally try and run away. Whereas a scrub bull, sometimes you can't pick it. They are probably more likely to get charged by a scrubber than you are by a buffalo.
Yep.
But both happen. So,
that's my experience, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, back to the 45-70. I think that was a good place to start in the 45s as one that doesn't do the job. So, in that context of what the 45s, in my opinion, are for, so the 458s, that's your start to the stopping place in terms of the niche. And the 45-70 doesn't fit there.
No.
It probably fits more down at the 9.3 by 62 end, in my opinion. It'll do it.
Yep.
It's okay. It's just be judicious when you're using it.
And that wouldn't be your first choice.
No, it wouldn't be my first choice. No, not at all.
Yep.
So I think, again, sticking to the common stuff here, with the first two 458s we've got to talk about are pretty close together. We've got the 458 Win Mag, and we've got the 458 Lot. Thoughts?
458 Win Mag, you're going to have a read of Taylor and then his African cartridges. He said a lot of things about the 458. He also had problems with the 458, but he also discussed in those days the poor crimping and seating of projectiles, and also using like a 4 or 5 round magazine. That last round, when he was culling elephants, stayed
back in the case.
Yeah, and so there was some bad blood from that. But there's a lot of people who would argue that the 458 Win Mag is a stopper if used right.
Yep. So I think one of the other issues that forever plagued the 458 Win Mag, and these are historical issues, not necessarily where we are today.
Yep.
So definitely the issue of not being crimped properly on a relatively straight-walled case, and then that projectile coming back in the case, and then causing powder compression. But the other thing I think you had back in the day was crappier powders. So you had non-temperature stabilised powders that didn't necessarily handle tropical environments in a wonderful way. And so you get clumping, you get inconsistent ignition from the primer through the powder stack.
Yep.
And again, for the 458 Win Mag to perform in the bracket, so the bracket is 2150 feet per second.
Yes.
Look, in reality, the 458 Win Mag, it just gets there. It's not much.
It doesn't do it easy.
No, it's not doing it easy. It's got a bit of pressure there to get that job done.
Yep.
Which nowadays, with modern temperature stabilised powders, better factory ammo, better reloading practices, I think all those things are have mitigated the many insignificant issues that back in the day caused some pretty serious problems.
Yep.
And that probably leads into the next cartridge, which is this one here, which is the 458 Lot. So the 458 Lot, again, not exactly, but in broad terms, is a 375 H&H case necked up to 458 caliber. And it was Jack Lott's answer to a question, which nearly involved him getting eaten by something or stomped on. So he was using a 458 Win Mag, had issues with the round, and came into a bit of misfortune. And as a result of that, overseas, came home and went, what do we do to fix this? Well, you know, the old African way of doing stuff was to go bigger case, you know, and less pressure in those environments, and you know, to stop all those issues we just talked about with the 458 Win Mag, and he designed the 458 lot.
But did he want the ballistics to be different, or was he trying to achieve similar with less?
I think it does more with more. So he wanted a bit more than the Win Mag does, and I think back in the day, you know, with the temperature issues on the powder, those issues we talked about with projectiles, you know, and one of the common issues, like you know, you read about it all the time. You know, you'd go and buy your packet of fancy, you know, African ammo to go and do your safari with, and it'll tell you what the velocity is going to be based on a certain barrel length or whatever.
Yeah.
They were regularly nowhere near the mark. So
Test barrels were a little bit different.
might have been a bit different. And, you know, there was no way of the hunter back then proving that claim. So you're not like nowadays where, oh, I don't like what they're saying, I'm just going to pull out my Garmin Zero chronograph and my Doppler radar and shoot one and see what it does. None of that. So you couldn't...
You kind of had to take them at their word, didn't you?
Well, you did. And so some of your theories on ballistics are a bit skewed based on that, because they might say that your 458 Win Mag is doing 2,150 feet per second, when in reality it's doing 1,950 or 1,900 feet per second.
Yep.
Or worse, if the powder's clumped up or you've got crappy primers in it or whatever. So you can... And it's one of the things with the firearms industry in general. You know, you only have to have one issue of one nature with a given cartridge, and
it's tainted then, isn't it?
It's tainted. No one wants that anymore.
Yeah.
Look, I don't think it was that bad with the 458. Well, what for those who got eaten by buffalo and stepped on whatever, it was pretty bad. But for you know,
it was sub optimal, wasn't it?
Probably not what you're chasing, but you know, and so
pretty good adventure to ride home about if you could ride home about it.
From hospital, eating through a straw. But yeah, so it gained a bit of a poor reputation because of that stuff, and the 458 lot I think solved that problem. You know, it's not a trusted case. You know, that one of the things about the lot though, and so I've had a 458 lot for a number of years. I don't have one currently, but one was on a Ruger RSM bolt action rifle, which they're similar to, well, they're a 77 action, but they're a Magnum action. They're quite a nice rifle. They still kick around nowadays. You can get them in the H&H, you can get them in 416 Rigby, and you can get them in the 458 lot. They're a good thing. Like if you're out there and you're in the market and one pops up, have a look at the Ruger RSMs. You know, they've got nice ebony fore end on them. They're a good rifle.
Yep.
Digressing slightly.
Very handsome, yeah.
Anyway, I had one in 458 lot, and I shot a number of scrub bulls with that. I don't believe I took any buffalo with that particular rifle. Shot heaps of pigs with it. I used to actually load the 4570 400 grain projectiles.
For pigs?
Yeah, for pigs.
That would be a bomb.
And it just absolutely exploded them. And obviously, your standard, as per this, a 500 grain Woodley, you know, it just gets it done. And so the ballistics on these, broadly speaking, you know, is in that same 2,400 feet per second with a 500 grainer.
Yep.
And
but that ends up with a half decent SD.
It does.
And so you go to a 500 grainer in a 458, and then compare that SD wise with a 570 and 500.
Yep. Yeah, the 458 will penetrate better than the really big bores. You know, I think we've seen that a number of times. And I'd make the same comment about the 416s. You know, there's always this trade-off between frontal area hit and penetration.
Yep.
You know, it just exists, and it's
you just got to find, like you said before, that happy medium.
The balance, and that projectile construction piece is really important, I think, for that particular issue. And look, the 458 lot, if you're going to go and hunt big, dangerous stuff, and you want to be able to stop it and break its shoulders, the 458 lot's a good round. Like I think it is. One of the things that I find interesting with that round, like when you look at it, it's not quite straight. You know, you just feel a little bit there, but there's a smidgen of taper on it, but that is a big, long powder column, and in my experience, when you fill up a big, long powder column like that, you know, they come back pretty quick. So I've found that this is one of the less shootable rifle cartridges.
It can be because of how much more powder and weight you can fit in the front. So a mate of mine, a good mate of mine, has one of these in a Ruger number 1. It is a very heavy barrel. I've shot this gun, and it actually runs a muzzle brake. We shot it with and without. With the muzzle brake, I'm not going to say pleasant.
I wouldn't.
but with the muzzle brake, it's very comfortable.
Yeah.
Without the muzzle brake, even with that very heavy barrel, it's I think 0.95 at the
right.
muzzle. It's heavy.
Yep.
It's a lot more gun than a 4.58, and so
Than the Win Mag, yeah.
yeah, sorry, than the Win Mag.
Yep.
But again,
And
if you can push the right projectile faster,
yep. You get more hit.
you're going to get more hit. It's going to penetrate better. It's going to kill quicker.
And I think that's one of the comments I'd make about this round. You know, if you don't have to load everything to full potential. So for the same reasons we don't load a Rigby 416 Rigby to 2600 feet per second because it's going to punish you on the recoil end. You don't have to load this at 2400 feet per second. It doesn't. It'll do good work there, but you're going to feel it on your shoulder. So for me, I think the 4.58s, you know, that 2200 feet per second is a nice place to be. You know, it's a little bit slow is fine as well. I have no issues with that whatsoever. But once you're over that sort of 2000 and a bit feet per second with a 500 grain bullet,
it's going to come back.
Yep.
But it also comes,
and it's going to do the job. Like it's,
yep. Oh, it will. But it comes down to how many rounds are you going to fire on dangerous game, and can you use that on other game where you come from? For argument's sake, someone who is going to be hunting red deer or wapiti or sambar, then, you know, like a 4.58 Win Mag, especially with open sights or a little red dot, that's a great scrub gun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can take buffalo with it, you know, and let's talk about where you're going to be shooting sambar and how dense that is and how much extra noise comes out of the lot versus the Win Mag, and then how much of that, especially in dense stuff, how much is coming back into your ears, you know, and just the muzzle blast coming back. And if you're going to be shooting a stack of buffalo and that's your buffalo gun, you're going to mainly on plains or in more, let's say, savanna, then those things cease to be as important. But if you're only going to shoot a couple of buffalo, but then you're going to go and use it elsewhere for even pigs and deer, well, then the 4.58 Win Mag will still do that job and be more comfortable in its normal day job.
Yep. I think it just comes down to what can you get the rifle that you like in from a cartridge perspective, because they're not all super available, you know. And the 4.58 lot's not super available. Like, yeah, you're probably going to have to do a custom job, although you can grab a 4.58 Win Mag and get it reamed out. And that's probably that's a really good point to talk about. So your 4.58 lot in a pinch, you can't get ammo. Well, you can just whack a 4.58 Win Mag round in there and fire it. So no problem with that at all. That is certainly a doable thing, and that's probably more relevant to our international hunter than the Australian hunter hunting in Australia.
Yes.
But, you know, it's certainly an interesting thing. And
in a pinch, there's not many that you can do that with.
No, there isn't. Not in the big bore cartridges. So, and I mean, I'd probably go the other way to your line of thought there. I don't disagree with it, and I carried a few years back chasing sambar, a 4.58 Win Mag. There's just a certain joy in carrying a really big gun to chase a big thing.
Oh, there is.
No doubt about that. For me, I think the 4.58 lot, I like the idea of operating at lower pressures. So I'd probably, if I was running one of these again, go down the pathway of running the 500 grainer at around 2150, not having it, you know, stoked up super hot, and then just deal with those.
An easy bolt lift, everything's easy, less comeback, less ears.
Yeah. One of the other things that's great about the 416 Rem Mag and the 4.58 lot, you're never ever going to be short of cases. So if you can't find these cases, you can get 375 H&H and make it work. So, you know, 8mm Rem Mag or whatever you find around the place that's about that same size, you know, you can certainly make on the lot case, I think.
But then talking about Australian manufacturers, you got Bertrand Brass, who has all of that stuff, and you can buy them at max length and trim them to the length that you want anyway.
100%. And look, Bertrand Brass sometimes you read a bit on the international forums, and it gets a bit, they dig at it a little bit.
They do, but I don't.
It's unnecessary. Like I've got a lot of Bertrand Brass, and you know, it's a great Australian product.
Yep.
It really is.
And support them, or if you don't, then you'll lose them, and then you're a slave to whatever they bring in. And as firearm importation laws get heavier, your choice is going to be less. The cost per case is going to become greater, and it's an Aussie family in an Aussie industry making an Aussie product, and it's suitable for everything. It's in my big bores, that's all I use.
Yep. No, I do not disagree with that at all. So, any other 458s we should talk about? We talked about the 460 Weatherby briefly. I
Yeah.
Don't know that we want to labour that point, but the
No.
460 Weatherby kind of, it's at a tolerance threshold that's probably not suitable for most hunters. Like I shoot a lot of big stuff, and I don't know that I'm very comfortable with the 460 Weatherby as a concept. I just don't think I'd.
It's just rude.
It's rude. It's like your friend's number one there with the muzzle brake on it. Unacceptable.
It's just
no
not.
One, no one wants to go with that guy. It's not what we do. It's not classic enough.
It's not classic. And look, and in his defence, he bought it like that, and he is in the process of having that removed and returned to normal. Because he shoots a 5.77 Martini as well.
Right. So he's no stranger to a bit of recoil.
No, he doesn't mind a little bit of recoil.
Yep. Yeah. Nice. All right. So I think we might step out of the 458s and we'll step into the next step up. I think, which is the 470 Nitro Express.
So yeah.
You got anything else you want to talk about there, or?
No, I'm ready to go 470.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So, I mean, Steve and I, we in the stopping double cartridges, we have similar but not exactly aligned theories on that particular topic, and we're going to go there shortly. But Steve's the 500 guy, and I'm the 470 guy. So, I like what the 470 Nitro does. And there's a couple of things, and I mean, we can talk about the 450 Nitro as well, but the 450 Nitro is basically the same thing, but 458 caliber instead of 470 caliber. Or 470.
And that was more a political change, though, wasn't it?
Well, that's right. So
than it filling a gap or filling a hole that the 458 that couldn't fill.
Absolutely. So the 470 Nitro actually came about because the 450 Nitro was banned in India because 45 caliber was a military caliber, and they didn't want 45 caliber cartridges kicking around. So all the British manufacturers said, right, that's not what we do now. We do the 470 Nitro, and so that's where it came in. But basically, the 470 Nitro, and there's one here. That's a great looking cartridge, isn't it? And that's a 500 grain Woodley Weld core in the front of that. You know, that 470 Nitro, it does what the 458s do, but does it in a double rifle with a rim case, basically.
Yep.
You know, it's launching a 500 grainer at around 2150 feet per second again.
A lot of regulated velocities of that, yeah.
Yeah, but a very, very low pressure round. Like in the big scheme of things, there's
40 something.
Lots of double rifles available in it, and not all of them are ridiculously expensive. So I think a topic we'll talk about in a little bit, you know, is that double versus bolt gun for this category of cartridge. And the reality is double rifles are very cool. They're very fun. They are probably not as practical as a bolt action in reality land, in my opinion.
Their niche is smaller.
Niche is smaller, particularly in the Australian context, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely, there is a joy in hunting with a double rifle. I love doing it, but if I'm after a particular trophy or a bit of a once in a lifetime type thing, I'm probably going to pick a bolt gun just for the versatility of that particular action type. But look, the 470 Nitro, if you want to sum it up, it does what a 458, either the Magnum Win Mag or the Lot does, but it does it in a double rifle.
Yep.
You don't typically find them in other actions. In theory, you could put them in a number one or something like that if you wanted to, but they just don't really do it. But I would say it's probably the most common double rifle cartridge of modern time. Would you agree with that?
I would suggest yes.
Yeah.
There are some, like the 500 is making a resurgence.
Yeah, I think they're neck and neck nearly, aren't they?
But I think a lot of people shy away from the 500 because whether it's the old stories of the recoil, whether it's just, I mean, there is more gun there, right? We're talking more gun.
A little bit.
But if you have a look at the Merkels, though, the Merkel barrel diameters are the same externally between the 500 and the 470. And so the 470 will have heavier barrels and will make it feel like it's less recoil because it's a lighter overall combination, whereas the 500, I don't know if the recoil is that much bigger, but you got a lot less steel on the barrels, you got a lot less out front, and so they come back that little bit harder. Yeah, for sure. Do you think that plays a part?
Yeah, look, I do, and look, I think that one of the key tenets Terminal Edge Australia is we are not going to talk about politics. We're just not doing it.
None.
So if it's not related to outdoor pursuits, we don't do it on this. But one of the issues with a 500 nitro is that in the broad parlance, it's a 50 cal. So
Yes.
I have seen some people have issues from a licensing perspective
Yep.
in certain states with that, which is ridiculous. Like
It's
that,
ridiculous.
you know, these are old school double rifle cartridges. They're designed for big stuff close up. The ballistics are actually rubbish once you go past about 150 metres.
Like a 9mm.
Yeah, they're really just not worth. They're not designed for that space. But I think for me the 470 nitro, it does what the 458s do. It has more hit when it hits a target, which is purely a function of being slightly wider, in my opinion.
Yep.
And if you're shooting buffalo broadside where there's more than one there, a 470 nitro is your gun. Like it is perfect for that. It's better than a 458 for that because the reality is it'll hit, it'll penetrate, it'll parachute as that projectile opens, and it'll stop on the offside on a broadside shot. Almost guaranteed. Now 500 does that too, but but the 470, when you consider the niche, the 470 does it better than a 458 in that scenario. You know, in other scenarios, where we're talking soft points here, not solids, but that going away buffalo and shooting out the backside, maybe a 458's better. But again, you're splitting hairs when you're starting to talk this level of terminal ballistics. Look at
So I think with the 500, you've only got 70 grains more powder.
Yep.
Sorry, projectile weight.
Yeah.
But you have, they're a 510 caliber, so you've got significantly more frontal.
Yep.
And I think that we're looking at that 2150. Don't quote me, but I think it's around 5,800 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle.
So you're at nearly 1,000 foot-pounds more energy at the muzzle than you are with a 470, which is about 5,000 foot-pounds ballpark.
Yeah. So I think that plays a part.
Yep.
But then again, choices could also be down to what people have read and what stories that they've been told. 100%. Depending on who you read, they may say, look, the 570 does everything a 500 nitro does with less recoil or with less this or with more that. Yep. And whereas the 500 nitro fans or riders back in the day say, in my experience, the 500 nitro killed better, it penetrated better. And then you see those tests that they do between the 500 nitro and the 600, for argument's sake, and the 500 nitro penetrated better given the same medium.
Yep.
And obviously there's a lot to be said in that because there's 900 grainer versus a 570, but they weren't driven at a higher velocity to make up for the frontal.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot of questions involved, but
I think there's a truth around both of them is that they're both stopping cartridges, and as stopping cartridges doesn't mean you're going to stop the animal by shooting in the shoulder, but it means that the shock value of that round hitting that animal is so high in compared to other things, in comparison to other things that they can wear that name quite proudly. And if I'm honest, and it's no shock here, like the 570 grain bullet out of a 500 will stop better than a 470.
Yeah,
it just is what it is.
It will physically move the animal. No, it doesn't throw them, but it physically moves them.
There's just a lot of energy there.
Yes, well, I was hunting with a mutual friend of ours up north, and he was at 90 degrees to me, and I hit a bull broadside.
Yep.
It had already received one from someone else, and we were finishing the job.
Yep.
And I hit this with a 500 broadside, and he observed physical movement of the animal.
Yep.
That projectile was balled up on the skin on the other side, and like I said, I'm not talking throwing it.
Yep.
It moved it.
Yep.
And it went straight down. And you and I experienced similar with that bull out on the floodplain. They just thumped out in front of us, and the punishment it received.
Yep.
It was literally one step until that shoulder went down.
That animal is incapable of continuing further.
Regardless.
I'd go back to this comment though. So it still relies upon being able to shoot the cartridge.
You must. That's right.
You must be able to shoot the cartridge. Yep. And look, I'd put that out there though. Like the nitros sound deadly. It's a Nitro Express. It says everything I want a cartridge to say.
100%.
And this is for those that aren't aware, this is my favourite thing in the world is hunting big game with big guns. It's fun. It's just fun. Like I
It's
don't even
thrilling,
mind.
it's exhilarating, it's exciting, it's
I'm
dangerous.
happy to go and hunt pigs with the big guns, but
Yes.
I just rather, from a recreational hunting perspective, I like using the bigger rifles. It's fun, it's classic, it's a good time. Um, it's what I really like to do. But yeah, there's just something about that whole experience that it's a little bit different. Like
Yeah.
it's but the reality is, you still need to be able to shoot it well. And if you can't, I think that's probably a common sense thing for people out there. If you depending on your shooting style, your shooting stance, your body weight, your experience levels, all those types of things, anyone can learn to shoot up to certain calibers reasonably effectively without developing bad habits. But for some people, they have limits, and I think, we all have limits, I know what my limits are. I for me personally, I'd probably stop at 500 nitro as a limit. It's not what I want to shoot every day. I found the 470, it's up there. The 458 lot was a lot, and for me, I love the 416s and the 400 Jeffrey. They fit nicely in that balanced sort of accurate shooting but plenty of hit category. I'm happy to go a bit bigger. Don't really think I want to go smaller, but how does that sit for you?
So the 500 on one of the first bulls that I shot, I would almost call it murder.
Yeah,
I did not shoot that animal where it needed to be. I shot it as if the 500 nitro was a howitzer,
yeah,
and I shot the black bit,
yep,
and I had a gunfight with a very big buffalo in a pandana swamp
yeah.
in order to secure that animal. And I had to sit down after that.
And you're obliged after you fired that first shot. You're going in.
You're going in.
Yeah.
If you don't go in, then you should sell everything that you've got.
Absolutely.
And
There
take
is
up
an
crochet.
ethical argument to this, and we all acknowledge that things happen on the hunting field, but
Yep.
we got to do what we got to do as hunters to make sure the animals. If you're going to shoot it properly. And if you don't shoot it properly, fix it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, for me, that was learning how to shoot
Yep.
the big gun, because I went in with this understanding that it will just drop it, and it didn't, and I had to sit down and take a really good hard look at myself and have one of those one-way conversations that really, it hurts you, because you're like, you were insufficient for the task.
Absolutely.
Because of this reason, and then I had to then go and make myself sufficient by shooting that thing a lot, and I think that generated my current love for that 500.
Yep.
Because I got used to the recoil. I had a kick ease put on there, and I think that this thing right here
Yep.
can change. Like, you might have a gun that is a cow to shoot,
Yep.
but you get this set up right, and this one here, I don't know if you can see it, but you'll see that there's been a tapered wedge put in here, which sets the angle of the recoil pad to match your shoulder, reduces chop under your jaw,
Increases length of pull. So
increases length of pull.
Yep.
Yep. And so I had a different recoil pad put on there, because it extended the reach for me as well, because they're not a real big gun, them 500s. You're tucking in a little bit. But after, I don't know, let's say 100 rounds of not plinking, but focused shooting to increase my skills, from that point on, the buffalo, then became a stopping cartridge. Does that make sense? Like if you misuse it, which I did on that first occasion, it wasn't a stopping cartridge.
Yep.
But as soon as I worked out how that thing really works, and then I put that bullet, it is a stopper.
I think it's a key point. These big bore cartridges, they come with a bit of romance. They come with a bit of classic design. They come with all the things that we want to do, and as Australian hunters, we aspire to do certain things on the hunting field, and some of those things are usually, for most Australian hunters, eventually you're going to have a bit of an inkling to want to go and do some big game in Australia, so your scrub bulls and your buffalo or whatever, and then your next bit of an inkling that might occur after that is an inkling to go somewhere different and shoot some more big stuff. So and then but you just have to get proficient with the guns. It is what it is, and I think a lot of people say you can shoot up to a 375 H&H without too much of a worry about the recoil. If you can shoot most of the other middle bore stuff, like your 30-06s and that sort of thing, you can step up to a 375 with a little bit of practice, and it's all going to be all right. And so a lot of people like that as a concept for the bigger gun. Once you get into the 40 cals, that's a little bit different. So I think 40 cal and up, you got to practice, and take a big gun and go and shoot a rabbit with it. It's get some steel out or a bit of paper or whatever, and shoot those big guns.
Turn it into your carry gun.
Yeah.
and just shoot it.
And for me, one of the things I've always liked to do as a hunter is I basically go and get one of those crappy barbecue dinner plates, and I go and
Yes.
put it out at a given range. And then for the style of shooting that I'm conducting at the time, if I can put all of my rounds into that dinner plate, that equates to smaller than the vitals on most big game.
Yep.
So, that whole dinner plate exercise, is certainly something I apply with the big bores. And if I'm either because the sights aren't right or the rifle doesn't fit me, I keep tinkering with it or tinker with the load until I get it to a point where I can.
Yep.
So,
I think that's fair.
it's absolutely a valid consideration. So,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, so 500 nitro, 570 grainer. It's a good bullet. It does the job.
Yep.
So, in the Australian context, do we need to go bigger than? So 50 cals. Talk me through some more there, Steve.
Have I told you about how much I like the 577?
You have told me about that, yes.
Does that fit within this discussion?
Well, I think the discussion is about, for the Australian context, for the reality of what's available out there. Let's talk about it. 577 is cool.
Because they're not. Yeah, that's right. Well, they're not really
But is it
available, are
practical?
they? Is it practical? It only has one real purpose.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be doing a lot of buffalo hunting, for argument's sake,
Yep.
and as soon as you start reloading, well, obviously you have to reload because you will not be buying
getting
ammo,
factory. Yep.
no factory ammo. It's not really that dear, and that's something that we haven't really talked about. And it'd be for another discussion. Is the physical cost of shooting a 500 nitro versus a 375 H&H?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That'd be another topic. But I mean, I love the 577, and the only thing I'll say on that is when we talk about that step from 470 to 500, you've got that next step to that 577, which is a 585 bore diameter.
Yeah.
And so your BC drops as soon as you go up there, because like you're shooting, I'm shooting 650 grainers out of in that 585 diameter, and I'm getting that 1980 or 19 something feet per second.
When you got that sort of bullet weight, that's some pretty serious business.
Oh, the recoil is significant. I'm shooting that out of a Martini.
Yeah.
However, once you get used to it, and you set up your recoil management and you practice with it. The only thing I will say is with regards to how it hits.
Yep.
The difference on the entry side, and this is the splat factor that we discussed with regards to frontal area.
Yep.
Let's say something like a pig, even a big bore, where that projectile goes in, you will get tears on occasion.
Yep.
Looks like a banana
From overpressure.
from overpressure. And that's on the way in.
Yep.
And you don't get that in the 375s, the 416s, and
Not so much, unless you're running a real soft projectile.
Yep, and maybe if you hit a little tiny bit of branchie or something on the way through.
Yep. Absolutely.
But they're in their own little niche, and they probably don't fit.
No. So we're still in the 50s here, because the 577's 50 anyway you cut it.
Want to go 505 like the Gibbs or?
Yeah, so I think a couple that get an honourable mention that are probably not very practical in the Australian market. And again, I'm not offending anyone who's right into these big cartridges. They're cool. But 505 Gibbs, cool. 500 Jeffrey, cool.
Well, that's the 500 Jeffrey. There's your bolt action rimless 500 nitro.
Yeah.
I mean, they almost, and this is grain of salt. They almost duplicate.
Yeah.
The 500.
Yep.
Which is, and if you can have 3 in the mag.
Yep.
That's a lot of firepower, especially if you're having a gunfight with a big bull.
Yep. So I think for the context here on this video, I think 50 cals are too much for the reality of, we're talking buffalo, we're talking scrub bulls, we're talking the Australian context. I think once you go to 0.5, you're starting, and they're not too like, go and get a 50 cal. If it blows your hair back, get one.
You need one.
The 50s are great. Get a 500 nitro, get a 505. That's not what I'm saying. But they're quite specialised.
Yep.
Your components are harder to get. Probably with the exception of the 500 nitro, your cases, etc. They're a little bit harder to get. Your rifle's going to have to be custom, generally speaking. It's going to be a labour of love if you go down that pathway. And so, I think that's a valid point. Are they good for the context we're talking about, shooting scrubbers and buffalo?
Sure.
absolutely.
But is it required?
No, and
I don't think so.
there's a couple of other ones like that are out there as well. You know, the 450 Rigby's had a bit of a,
Yep.
it's become a thing of late, and 450 Rigby, all the comments that we've made about the 458 lot probably apply to the 450 Rigby. Pretty similar type of concept. It's the case necked up, and it's actually a little bit more modern. But Rigby are offering their rifles in 450 Rigby, and they're the if you don't want to call a 416 Rigby a stopper, which is an argument that we can have another time.
Yep.
I think the 450 Rigby is a stopper. It's back up in that 45 cal, hard hitting, heavy recoil.
Yep.
Big.
It's a lot of gun.
It's a lot of gun. So
there's a lot of powder getting burnt.
yeah, absolutely. And is it available? Yeah, it is. Like is it going to be expensive and bespoke? Also, yes.
Yes, it is.
It is what it is. So, I think we're probably at a point now. We've gone through the brackets pretty comfortably. There's a couple of other things I did want to talk about just as we get there, and I'm conscious that we've been going for an hour and 40 minutes now without a breath. So, if anyone's still watching, well done.
Yeah.
Well played, team. But for listening to this absolute prattle. But, anyway, so a couple of other things I want to talk about. So Magnum cartridges in general. So I hear comments to this point, from time to time, talking about the smaller board Magnums being, capable of dangerous game, etc. And it's a topic that's going to touch a nerve with a few people, no doubt. But I'm a pretty staunch sort of believer in the fact that the classic bigger bores are way better. And when you're starting to talk, putting a heavy bullet in and using your 300 Win Mag on buffalo, you might be missing the point of what hunting buffalo is.
Yep.
For me, it is not a dangerous game round. It's a trophy hunting round for engaging, species out at longer ranges where you need to make sure you can get the shot. Can you do it with a 300 Win Mag? Yeah, you can.
It's been done.
Is it the right answer? For me, no, it's not.
Not when you have better options available.
Yeah.
And especially if you've got them in your battery.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
And for me, that's why it starts at about the 9.3s. That's where I think it is. An interesting one to talk about, though. We talked about it before we got down here. So, the 338 Win Mag, the 338s, where do they fit?
Are they even needed? I know this is going to hurt some feelings, but one experience I had with 338, I've never shot an animal with a 338. That's straight up. I came across a carcass on the side of the road.
Yep.
And it was not a overly large bull. However, I picked up...
We're talking buffalo or...?
No, we're talking buffalo bull.
Yep.
I picked up about 8. This is from memory, about 8 cases from the road till I got to the buffalo that was on the ground. And there were 2 or 3 cases on the ground. So we're talking jacked out cases, and they were nickel. That's how I could see them, because they shone bright. It was burnt country. There was these 8 nice shiny nickel cases from where this car had pulled up, seen the buffalo, shot it, ejected the case, and continued in. It wasn't an overly big buffalo, but there was 8 cases on the ground.
Yeah, of 338.
338 Win Mag.
Yeah, right.
And, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just, it doesn't... It's that little bit. It's a little bit bigger than a 300 Win Mag, and it's that little bit smaller than a 375 H&H. And some may argue that there's a gap, but is there really a gap, and does it need filling?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because the bullet weights are wildly variable in 338. So 180 grainer, up into the 250s. 225 is probably the sweet spot there. And look, I'm going to say if you've got a 338 Win Mag and you put a 225 grain Barnes X in it.
Yes.
You got a buffalo.
Yep. It'll kill buff.
Yep.
Every day.
Yeah. Do you have a buffalo stopper? No, you don't. Absolutely not. And is it classic? It's acceptable. It's not classic. It's does that matter? Not really. But I did hear an interesting comment on I think it was on a podcast the other day. It basically said, the wording was the 338 caliber is dead from a hunting perspective because there are just so many good options out there now. So what you might have used a 338 on to do with thin skin, large trophy game, you don't need it now because all of your 300 Magnums will do it, and your 7mm Magnums are doing what your 300s used to do because of the projectile advancements and all that sort of thing. And why do you need to tolerate the recoil and blast and all of that with the 338? for that context.
Yep.
And it's an interesting point. It's it used to get a lot of good press over in the States for hunting bears and that sort of thing. It was 338 was one of the rounds they talked about all the time, and it's always been thought of as being a bit small for Australian stuff. I don't think that's strictly true. I think the 338 is very capable of as a straight killing round. If we're going to say the 9.3 can do it, then a 338 can do it. But interesting topic anyway. Not one I would recommend for sure. I just don't think it fills the niche exactly, in my opinion. But it will do that. Right. So I think what are we now? We're an hour and 45 minutes. Probably time to start rounding out here.
Yeah.
I'd say it's honestly we could talk about this stuff all day. It's one of our key topics, and it's something that we will spend hours around a campfire yarning about. But
usually better with a G&T.
Definitely better with a gin and tonic. One of the things I think we should probably just do, because again we're going to talk about two more issues I think before we close up here. And one is it's all well and good to talk about all these cartridges. What rifle are we going to put them in? Is a topic that we need to settle. And then we're going to have to pick our favourite cartridge out of everything we've talked about, or not what we've talked about, for the purpose of hunting Australian large/dangerous game.
A single choice.
You're going to pick one. You are going to put a thing on the table and you're going to say it out loud for everyone to critique you on later.
Okay.
So the first thing I guess we probably want to wrap up though is the rifle thing. Like the big bore rifle market, it's gotten difficult. I feel like we used to have this really great position in Australia where we had all the CZs like this one here, there, and they were, with a little bit of modification, they became a very reliable tool, and they've got a great international reputation as a good dangerous game controlled round feed rifle. And we haven't even dabbled in the controlled round feed versus push feed argument. We're not going to, but clearly if you say push feed, you're in the wrong camp. So
I love push feeds.
Anyway, I agree to disagree. But one of the options on the market now. So your Winchester Model 70s are still out there with your Safari Expresses, although you're going to be 375 H&H, 416 Rem mag, and I think they're still doing those in 458 Win mag, I believe. So
they'd have to.
I think so. Yeah, they're not doing them in the Rigby, so they're definitely in the Rem mag on those. Your CZs, unfortunately, they're out of production now. So the old Bruno 602s, which are similar, and the CZ 550s, if you can find them on the second-hand market, they're a great option, and they're a true magnum action. So, pretty much anything that we've talked about today, you can do on a CZ 550, probably with the exception of the rim cases, which are not designed for bolt-action rifles. They're designed for other things. Browning, they still run a factory 375 H&H in the series, so that's a good thing. But they don't go bigger than that. And the reality is, if you want to go bigger, you're sort of in the bespoke rifle market now. Like your British guns, your high-end German guns, your Mausers, your Rigbys, your Heims, in those sorts of things. But you're gonna pay money for it, aren't you? So there's a few more options over in the States. I think in Australia now, you might want to talk to a gunsmith as well. There's definitely options to get a nice action. And
we look what you can buy a nice M98.
Yeah.
In its original factory military form.
Yep.
A couple of $100.
Yep.
Yeah, sure. The gunsmith's going to have to do a lot of work to make it suit, and you're going to be paying him a significant amount of money. But then you've got a rifle made for you.
Yep.
And then you go and compare that with what you would need to spend to get that as a factory offering.
Yep.
I can't see you paying more for a gun that's has been made for you, as long as you don't go crazy with it.
Yeah. No,
just a basic hunting firearm.
Yep. No, I tend to agree. Yeah. So look, the market is a little bit limited nowadays in terms of what out there, but there's still plenty of options, around the place, and you've only got to go looking on the second-hand market a little bit. And the newer guns, it just comes down to really what you're willing to spend on these types of rifles, and that can be a consideration. I think we discussed earlier. Seiko are still doing some of the bigger offerings out there on their 85s and newer 90 action.
Yeah.
I personally am not a huge fan of those, but that said, I used to have a Seiko Kodiak in 375 and I loved it. But there are some personal preferences around those for me. But yeah, there's options out there, and the discussion of a bolt action rifle versus a double rifle,
Yep.
yeah, in reality land on what we're talking about today, they're your key choices. And I think your double is classic. It's fun to use, but they're expensive. You are probably going to want a hand load because you're going to have to get a regulating load, which to sort out your convergence on your barrels. I think the most pragmatic option is a good controlled round feed action in a bolt action rifle of something that blows your hair back. And even if you buy one of the 375s or whatever on the market and then change the barrel on it to something different, it's an easy way of doing it as well. If you want something a little bit different, there's still out there. I know plenty of people around the place that are running some of the more obscure large cartridges, and it's there if you want to go down that pathway. But yeah, it's probably part of the reason why I've got the CZ 550 in front of us today, because it is historically one of the better options. They're still pretty common. Like they've gone up in value quite a lot. Between those and the Winchester Model 70s, I think are probably the most common things on the market in this space nowadays. Yeah. Anyway, we're getting towards the end here, team. So we're going to close it out. Steve, so for the Australian context, and we're not talking the Australian international hunter. I think we'll make a couple of comments to that as closing comments. But what is the one round for you that you are going to carry in the field for the rest of your days to hunt Australian big game?
All right, I'll put on the table. I would most likely choose my M98 in 416 Chatfield Taylor.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
That is not what I thought you were going to say.
I know, and you got my brain thinking.
Yep.
And I had to put a single, a single answer.
Yep.
If we were talking a battery, it would be different.
Sure.
And whilst I love my 500 Nitron, I love the 577.
Yep.
There is something about that 416 that
practical.
It's
balanced.
very, very practical. It's balanced. The recoil, the muzzle blast, the accuracy, and the shootability, and how much the rounds don't weigh compared to the 577s, etc. So you can carry more ammo. It's easy to carry. It's a light gun. It's got one of them little ram lines.
Yep.
I mean, obviously, we're not just choosing the actual firearm, but the caliber would be 416 Chatfield Taylor.
Okay. Good stuff. Look, for me, it's probably not going to come as a huge surprise. What might do, actually. So I love the 375 H&H. I do. But in this context, the 375 H&H isn't the choice I'd make. It'd be the 416 Rigby. And I am in a fortunate position. I've got a Rigby rifle in 416 Rigby, and it's a beautiful piece of steel and wood. It's nice to carry. It's nice to shoot. But it's not about that. For me, it's the cartridge itself. So it's well balanced. It's low pressure. It's got amazing ballistics in the big scheme of things. The 416s shoot flatter than people give them credit for.
Yes.
So, people often use that example of the 375 shooting equivalent to a 30-06 with a 180 grain load. I don't think the 416s are markedly different. They're a little bit.
They hold the velocity well.
They hold the velocity fairly well. They've got, depends on the shape of the bullet. But, for me, that's going to be the 416 Rigby. Yeah, so, look, that pretty much closes out our discussion today. Thanks for coming down, Steve. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much for the offer.
Yeah. The only other sort of topic that we'd discuss, and we haven't done a real deep dive on it, but I think it probably comes down to a set of guidelines more than anything else, is the cartridge you would carry on the big bores for the Australian hunter who wants to hunt abroad. And look, the same comments we've applied to all this stuff today, we're probably going to apply to that topic as well. But I think it really comes down to that commonality and that risk of losing ammunition or having ammunition available wherever you're going to hunt around the world. And I think
don't want obscure, do you?
You don't really want to go hardcore obscure when you're doing that type of stuff. So for me, you're probably sitting around the 375 H&H, 416 Rigby or Remington. I think they're both pretty common. 458 Win Mag.
Yep.
That's, for me, they're the four that I'd probably choose if that was the business I was in. But we are where we are. Anyway, you got any closing thoughts? Or?
No, not really. I reckon we've covered a lot.
We should do. We've been talking for 2 hours.
Excellent.
Anyway, no, thanks for coming down, mate. I appreciate the discussion there. And look, for those who are watching, we have been yapping on for quite a while now, but Love to hear your comments on what your thoughts are on big bores that you'd use for Australian big game. And again, that context there, talking scrub bulls, talking buffalo, that's really where we're aiming there. Banteng at a pinch. But yeah, let us know what you use, what you love, or what you're thinking you're getting. And yeah, hope you enjoyed us banging on for the last couple of hours. Stay tuned for the next episode, which will probably drop in a week or so, and we'll pick another topic probably aligned with this sort of stuff. Thanks for watching.